with a case that has been hard for even the most seasoned investigators to forget: the death of Lacey Fletcher. Last January, what was left of her rotting 100-pound body was found embedded, melted into a couch in her parents' Louisiana home. Investigators say the sofa was soaked with urine, feces, and other bodily fluids. Fletcher was disabled, and her parents, according to police, just left her there for years until she died. WBRZ Chief Investigative Reporter Chris Nakamoto has been following the investigation from the very beginning. He joins us with an update that we first brought you here on The Factor months ago.
And joining us on The Factor Uncensored tonight is Chris Nakamoto, investigative reporter from WBRZ TV in Baton Rouge. Chris, you and I talked about this very disturbing case several months ago involving Lacey Fletcher, the 36-year-old who died in her parents' house. For those who don't know the past history, first tell us how she was found in her parents' house, and then we'll get to the latest news.
It was just an extraordinary situation. Paramedics showed up at her house last January, and they found her literally melted into the couch, covered in feces, looked like her hair hadn't been brushed for years, totally neglected. The coroner's office ruled that she was totally neglected. She was literally fused to the sofa. This as her parents were coming and going, living normal lives, going to work. Meanwhile, they have their daughter who had not gotten up from the sofa in what the coroner estimates was possibly years.
Wow. And what kind of illness did she have that they left her on that sofa without attending to her?
She had a condition called Asperger's syndrome. And so essentially it was just kind of a situation where she became more and more reclusive. A lot of the neighbors told us as we began covering the story, they used to see her outside playing, and then all of a sudden they stopped seeing her as she got older. And so they just thought that maybe she had moved on and moved away. But it turns out she was living right there in her parents' living room, and that's where she died, unfortunately, as well.
Now, initially, when this case broke, her parents were charged with murder. But now there's been a change in that, right?
That's right. So they were charged with murder and cruelty to the infirm. And from our understanding, it can't be both. And so as the DA was kind of looking at everything, their lawyers filed some court motions that basically had those charges removed because the indictment had some added language after. And so the new indictment was tossed on a technicality, but we did speak with the district attorney, and he says he plans on bringing it back up and having this couple re-indicted because he believes justice won't be served until they serve jail time.
Now, this brought a lot of public outrage. A lot of people have been following this. Even here at Fox 26 in Houston, our story was viewed 1 million times. People just outraged by this. Is there a chance that if this mother and father of Lacey Fletcher's re-indicted, could it be a lesser charge, or will it still be murder? Because I think people are concerned about that.
Certainly anything's a possibility, but when we spoke with the DA, it sounds like he's trying to press on and go after these two people on the murder charge because of what had happened to Lacey. When we spoke with the coroner last year, he said, look, I deal with death every day, and this is something that I can't even get out of my head. The smell was just awful. He said, the minute he walked into that house, he left and actually had to vomit in the front yard. And so he said, the fact that I deal with death all the time, and this impacted me in such a way, it's extraordinary to think that these people, her mom and dad, were literally living their lives, coming and going, and no one managed to know that their daughter was sitting there rotting away on the sofa of their living room.
No, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that the mom and dad are out on bond right now while all of this is going on.
That's correct. So they were out on bond initially after they were charged, but now that the indictments have totally been tossed, that bond really doesn't exist anymore because those charges are invalid. So the DA says within the next 2 weeks, they'll be charged again, they'll be rearrested, and then another bond will be set.
And for you, Chris, have you ever seen anything like this? I mean, and I think they said at one point, because she was on the sofa so long, maybe she ingested some of the sofa, started eating it, and there were other foreign things found in her body that she may have been eating as a result after the autopsy?
That is correct. They found sofa material. They found feces in her stomach. I mean, she was literally just sitting in this pool of rot, just fused there and just left for dead. In the 16 years that I've covered news here in the Baton Rouge community, I've never seen anything like it. When we talked to the coroner, he's been doing this over 40-something years in that parish. He said he's never seen anything like it. So when you think that another human being could leave a loved one or a family member in this type of condition, it really makes you just question what their, what was going on with them. Did they have something going on in their minds to think that this could be normal? And the fact that they could live a normal life outside of the fact that their daughter's rotting away, dying on the sofa. They were going to church, to work, to the grocery store. I mean, just living like you and I would live as normal citizens on a day-to-day basis.
Did they allow anyone into the house during the time that she was alive and sitting and just marinating in that stew on the sofa?
They did not. So we spoke with a lot of neighbors when we started investigating this situation, and they said the last time that they went into that house was probably about 15 years ago. So that was about the time that it stopped. When she stopped going outside and became a recluse and just went into the house, that's when they kind of stopped allowing visitors to come in. But you can only imagine what it was like. The fact that she just rotted into the sofa. They said all the wood floors inside were buckling from feces and urine. They said just the stench permeating throughout that house was just a smell they will never forget.
Wow, just a horrible situation. Chris Nakamoto with WBRZ TV in Baton Rouge. Thank you again, and thank you for keeping us updated, sir.
Today is Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Day, and it pleases me no end to see my brainchild accepted into the mainstream. Millions of people around the world are aware today of narcissists, their behavior or misbehavior, and the particular form of abuse, the likes of which there is none, narcissistic abuse. I was the first to describe it in the 90s and popularize it over the next 10 years when I've had the only website on narcissism and the only 6 support groups on narcissism online, well into 2004. And then all hell broke loose and people discovered that there's money in narcissism. So now everyone and his dog or cat are experts on narcissistic abuse, coaches, trainers, you name it. Well, let me tell you something, children. I'm old enough to have dined with the dinosaurs. And I can tell you one thing I've learned in my long and fruitful life. The only constant thing is change. So yes, every mental construct, every mental health diagnosis within the cluster B personality disorders can and does metamorphosize into other personality disorders within the cluster B, which is precisely why I've been advocating since 1997 to unify all these separate diagnoses into a single diagnosis of personality disorder cluster B with different emphasis. I'm glad that I created a cottage industry and have been sustaining so many tens of thousands of people around the globe. It's a gratifying feeling. I've made a difference. But this is not the topic of today's video. Self-congratulation is always welcome, of course. No one else will congratulate me, so I congratulate myself. This is an example of self-supply. Guten Tag, alles. Oops, what am I doing? I'm a Jew and an Israeli. Okay, Shoshanim. Boker Tov, ילדים וילדות, חביבים וחביבות. Today we are going to discuss my favorite topic on earth, dead mothers. But not dead in the physical sense, alas. Dead in the emotional, mental, and psychological sense. A construct first proposed in the 1980s by a brilliant psychoanalyst, Andre Green. Today we're going to discuss narcissistic mothers, borderline mothers, and psychotic mothers, and how they affect their unfortunate offspring. Look it up. My name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. I'm a former visiting professor of psychology, and I'm on the faculty of CIAPS, Commonwealth for International Advanced Professional Studies, Cambridge, United Kingdom, Toronto, Canada, and if you ever come by, if you ever pass through there, be my guest, Lagos, Nigeria. Dead mothers is the topic of today's video, and it's divided in two parts. The first part is for laymen. I'm going to describe the effect of such mothers on their children, lifelong, lifespan effect. It never goes away. And then I'm going to delve much deeper into the psychoanalytic construct of the dead mother. So, a part for laymen and a part for professionals, my usual cocktail. Back to our topic, dead mother. Andre Green coined this phrase in 1980 to describe the effects of mothers who are unable to provide what mothers should provide: devotion, selflessness, forgiveness, help to survive, survival, soothing, nourishment, a secure base, love that is essentially unconditional, and idealization of the child. So mothers who are unable to provide all this because they are absorbed in their own internal world of bereavement, anhedonia, depression, deadness, self-absorption, narcissism, and maybe psychosis. This kind of mothers, they raise children who later on as adults are equally unable to provide these functions. They have no altruism, no concern for others, no generosity, no empathy, and no functional object relations, no ability to develop interpersonal relations.
Yeah, I was like this to a significant degree pre-coma.
We're going to discuss all these effects and impacts as you progress through this video. I just hope you don't end up being dead viewers by the end. So the dead mother complex is a clinical condition, and it involves an early and destructive identification of the child with a figure of a depressed and emotionally unavailable mother, a dead mother in the metaphorical sense. And so the complex, the dead mother complex, involves a mother who was initially engaged emotionally with her child, but then switched off from emotional resonance to emotional detachment. Maybe she went through a loss. Maybe she is in mourning. Maybe she became more narcissistic. Her defenses kicked in. Maybe she was exposed to adverse life circumstances. Who knows?
Yeah, it's as if she switched off at some point or relatively early in my life, if not beforehand. She seems to have. She was always aloof, as evident in even the earliest baby pictures of mine and also my earliest memories. She always felt distant from me. Always, my whole life. That woman, you know, my whole life, I always felt like, am I adopted? Because she doesn't treat me like I'm her kid. She doesn't feel like my mom. She feels like some lady who found me one day. You know?
At some point, she transitioned from an all-good mother to an all-bad mother, or she transitioned from a good breast to a bad breast. This transition is utterly destructive. It is the main engine of narcissism. Pathological narcissism is a reaction to arbitrariness, capriciousness, unpredictability, indeterminacy, a lack of a secure base, a feeling of unsafety that are engendered by a mother who is intermittently reinforcing.
That is exactly what happened
loves and
to me.
hates, ambivalent, and consequently creates in her child the hypervigilance required to survive. The child monitors the mother constantly and continuously, fearfully anticipating her transitions from one state to another. When the child is unable to restore a feeling of some connection, he internalizes the hardness of the mother, her unresponsiveness, her absent emotional core, her emptiness. And this is what we call narcissism. Narcissism, in this sense, is an attachment disorder coupled with a fantasy defense. Because to not be attached to your mother is too painful. It fosters a lifelong process of bereavement and grieving and mourning, prolonged.
I didn't get so much as like a depression aspect to my life, but for sure I ended up growing up in a way where I would I have perceived the world at large as, life in general, as painful.
And the defense against this is to pretend that he is not he. The child pretends that he is not he. He is someone else, the false self. The false self is one step removed. You could conceive of it as an exoskeleton or a hard boundary, rigid boundary that doesn't allow the world to come in because the world is perceived to be as hostile, dangerous, and painful. Above all, painful. We're going to discuss all this. In the professional part, when I analyze Andre Green's dead mother complex. Narcissism is a dead mother complex. But who are these dead mothers? And why are they dead? And in which ways do they acquire their death-like qualities, their fanatic or destrudo qualities? In which sense? Well, there are three types that I want to single out, although there are many additional types of dead mothers. I want to single out the borderline mother, the narcissistic mother, and the psychotic mother, mother with psychosis or psychotic disorder. Start with the borderline mother. Borderline mothers are unstable. They are unstable in a variety of fields. They're unstable in interpersonal relationships. They have an identity disturbance. Their self-image fluctuates. Their affects are up and down. They have mood lability. Their values and beliefs change from one day to another. They are markedly impulsive. So this extremely volatile, fluctuating, labile environment is perceived by the child as ominous, threatening, the absolute antithesis, absolute opposite of a secure base. In the absence of a secure base, the child cannot separate from the mother and explore the world because he's afraid that once he had finished exploring the world, mother will be gone. In short, there is a problem with introject constancy. The child is unable to trust that in her constancy, trust that she will always be there for him. So, an unsafe mother creates an anxious child. And an anxious child cannot take on the world. It throws a temper tantrum whenever she wants to move away. This sense of lack of safety follows the child into adulthood.
I wasn't subject to peer processes. I was one of the most neglected, psychosocially, emotionally neglected kids around.
Imminent loss, anticipated loss, catastrophized loss. Now, the borderline mother is her entire psychodynamic, her entire internal world revolves around the twin issues of abandonment and engulfment. Abandonment engenders in her anxiety, separation, insecurity, and engulfment or
no normal mother does that. That's only pathological.
Generates an anxiety. So this kind of mother is approach avoidant. So the child doesn't dare to venture forth, to go out of his or her way, to meet other people, to socialize, to be subjected to peer processes. Peer processes are critical in adolescence, for example. So this kind of child remains homebound. But when the child tries to love her, to care for her, to show signs of emotions, her engulfment and enmeshment anxiety kicks in. The only way she knows how to relate to her child is via merger and fusion with the child. And so she feels consumed by the child. She feels hemmed in, stifled, strangled, suffocated by the child's presence, and she rejects the child, which again creates in the child an anxiety. And of course, the child becomes a reflection of the mother. The child also develops an abandonment anxiety. So all in all, there's an unstable and intense interpersonal relationship between the mother and the child, characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. Devaluation is disastrous as far as a child is concerned. It ruins his ability to regulate his own sense of self-worth, his self-esteem, his self-confidence, and ultimately his self-perception and self-image. In short, it engenders in the child an identity disturbance. There's no core identity. There's no one there. The mother hollows out the child, empties the child from the inside by refusing to allow the child to define his boundaries through her gaze. It's the mother's gaze that allows the child to realize this is mommy and this is me. She gazes at me because I'm external to her. And so her gaze tells me that I'm not her. So now I can individuate, I can separate, I can individuate, I can become me. The mother's gaze is the first boundary and the first periphery of an emerging sense of self. And so the mother's identity disturbance, her own unstable self-image or sense of self, washes on the child, contaminates the child, and makes it impossible for the child to create a sense of stable core. What happens with this kind of child who is exposed to a borderline mother? This kind of child has multiple self-states. They do not coalesce. They do not cohere. They do not communicate with each other effectively. In short, this kind of child becomes dissociative. Dissociation is a defense against pain and hurt.
My father's side of the family noticed that I was dissociated when I was a kid, and I'd go to visits, usually to my aunt's house with my dad and the mom of his. They were often alarmed when they saw me and they saw my behavior. Very interesting. Back then I didn't understand why, because I was a child. Today, with my adult brain, when I go back in time and look at what they were saying to me and why in the context, oh my God, I see it. I get exactly why they were doing that. Almost every time I'd be there, after a few hours, they'd ask, are you okay? Because I didn't act open and free like normal children. That's trauma response. They could tell, and in hindsight, I can clearly, as I said, I could clearly see that this is what they were observing. I thought the abusive emotional neglect of my mother was a normal part of life. Like a fish doesn't know it's in water until it's out of it.
And in the case of the child, the dissociation keeps the self-states separate from each other, so that some of them are better equipped to absorb the mother's emanation of anhedonia, depression, grieving, pain, hurt. A borderline mother is a painful mother. And this kind of mother is also impulsive, self-defeating, self-damaging, self-harming, self-trashing, self-destructive, self-handicapping. It's exceedingly painful to observe.
Yeah, her recent actions hugely show this. the way she acts towards her son causes dynamics within that relationship, within this relationship, and consequences for it that are destructive. Not only in a way that's destructive, that's bad for me, it affects her negatively too. Her actions, such as to do or say all these various things that are wrong, harmful, and incorrect, are all done, furthermore, by impulse. It's like instinct impulse. Is not even logically thought out. It just, her brain prompts the idea and then she mindlessly follows it, even though it hurts everybody. So, wrong thinking. That's what we're here for. You rebuke it, you cut the neuron to stop it. All right? If she has no filter, there's no thinking to halt the bad behavior before it's performed.
A mother who gets addicted to TV shows, I know what. The child is a witness, a mute witness, but still a witness of the mother's descent into hell. And he loves his mother. It's a painful thing to behold. Intolerable as far as the child. It's hell. It's an inferno. It's an ongoing nightmare.
And the creation of this hell is one that a normal mother with mirror neurons within the brain that work correctly and empathic elements and qualities that she successfully bears, these things would never permit a mother, such a mother, to become guilty of allowing the creation of such a hell. Only the embedded dysfunction we're here discussing today and every day is the thing that allows that to be possible. So, you know a tree by its fruits. If you look at the thing and the fruit you see sprouting from it are the behaviors consistent with narcissism, exactly right,
or
cluster B personality dysfunction, what is the reason for it? It's not an accident. A broken clock is right twice a day. This isn't a series of coincidences, broken clocks every day. Oh, it's just an internal coincidence. No.
Irritability, anxiety. During this mood, captured in this mood roller coaster, the mother is very threatening, is an ominous entity. She's a kind of monster, because it is the mother who should comfort and soothe the child and provide a secure base and a sense of safety and stability. The child has no other recourse to anyone else, and yet the child knows, should he attempt to extract these goods from mother, stability, safety, and so on, mother will erupt, often unpredictably, often vitriolically. So the child is caught in an approach avoidance situation of his own. And gradually, the child learns to negate himself, to vitiate himself, to empty himself, so that he doesn't exist. If I don't exist, I cannot be harmed. This is the child's message. Also as an adult, I am not here. I am not here. I am a fantasy. I am not here. I am not. The strategy this kind of child develops is a strategy of self-negation. The message is, I'm an absence. I am not a presence.
You
I am
did
not a being.
not get me
I'm
a
non-being.
chair.
I'm not an entity. I'm a non-being.
Remember that? When she came down and
Even the
we were arguing when
narcissist,
Sarah
overt
and me,
narcissist,
that story where Sarah and me
grandiose
were in my
narcissist,
place and my mom came down and we were arguing.
protestations that he is the world. This is compensatory. The mother, the borderline mother, hollows her child. She's like a huge excavator. She excavates the child's soul and trashes it, never to be returned, at least not in its pristine condition.
100%.
These chronic feelings of emptiness. And so this creates in the child transient, stress-related paranoid ideation, hypervigilance, dissociative symptoms, which reflect the mother's. This is the borderline, this is the outcome of the borderline mother. This is the borderline mother's offspring. And everything I've just described survives well into adulthood. Borderline mothers often create narcissists, codependents, or borderline children. Now let's proceed to the narcissistic mother. In this sense, the borderline mother is hyper-focused
So you know what?
on
Thankfully,
the child.
I didn't really
The child
become.
is getting too much attention.
I could have possibly
way,
been a narcissist when I was younger, but
equivalent of
the thing to
hyperreflexivity in
note,
psychosis,
very
as we
interestingly,
should say.
what happened to me with
So in
the
the borderline
coma, the
mother's
research
case,
chemicals, and the GABA B
child
upregulation,
is the eye
when I woke up,
of a twister,
it reset
hurricane,
that out, that
that is
potentiality that I
swirling
may have
around
inherited
you,
from all the
out to
bullshit
consume.
growing up. It
With a narcissistic
cleared
mother,
it, and
the
I
problem
could,
is
with
exactly
new
the
eyes,
opposite.
now see
The
the
child is
reality
not
of the
getting
life as it
attention.
is here,
Neglected,
and all the
ignored,
poor conditions for what it was.
repressed, suppressed.
Before the coma, I would never have been
The
able to see that any of this is
narcissistic
true about my mom.
is self-absorbed.
I wouldn't have been able to see
She
it, but I also would have been similar to
revolves
it. So you
around
see the problem?
herself.
It's like
she
when
is the only object in her world.
two people live in the same
She is
smelly house,
solipsistic.
neither of them can
There's
smell
no
it.
one
But when
else
one of them
there.
moves out, then you come back, you could smell it for what it is.
She converts external objects, including the child, into internal objects. And she snapshots the child, and she continues to interact only with the internal objects. She idealizes the internal object that corresponds to the child. She photoshops the snapshotted introject that represents the child in her mind. And if the child deviates from this internal object, if the child diverges, contradicts the internal object, shows any signs of autonomy or independence or agency, this infuriates the narcissistic mother, and she penalizes the child horribly.
And only a narcissistic or cluster B type, really, generally speaking, personality type of mother would do that, would penalize a son of hers, her own son, for that. But in fact, is right. If the child deviates from the snapshot that she generates in her mind, her own internal idea of who he's supposed to be. Imagine, in my own particular case, it's as if she says or thinks, oh, John is supposed to just sit there and be nice in life and just take anything I say that's bad or nasty. Doesn't matter, I'm mom, so he just has to sit there and smile back. And when he doesn't do that, therefore he is bad. So therefore I cannot possibly be wrong because he's bad. You see the broken logic there? Only flawed glitch personality, fucking psychotic disorder, related disorder, narcissistic disorder does that kind of thing.
Child is not allowed to separate, because a separated child is a child that is not the equivalent of the internal object, does not conform fully to the internal object, and this threatens the inner equilibrium and balance of the narcissistic mother's mind. Narcissism is a pervasive pattern of grandiosity in fantasy and in behavior. And grandiosity is, of course, a cognitive distortion. The mother coerces the child to become a source of supply. She insists on the child affirming, confirming, reflecting her grandiose, inflated, fantastic construct, narrative, story, piece of fiction about who she is. So it's very coercive. It's a coercive environment. And if the child fails to adulate her, to admire her, the child is punished. Child learns gradually to become a service provider and his mother's parent. Grandiosity distorts the entire world. The mother's cognition is erroneous, it's glitchy, it's buggy. And because the child initially, in the first 36 months of life, the child has access through the world almost exclusively through the mother's cognition, The child obtains a deformed, defective, and distorted view of his reality. He acquires impaired reality testing. Child also learns that his existence is conditional, contingent upon the mother's gaze. The child learns that to exist means to be seen, to be noticed. Yes, child is becoming a narcissist. And this deformity of reality leads the child, of course, to wrong decision making. This wrong decision making persists into adulthood in mate selection, for example. The child also learns to associate the world with his mother, because as I said, initially the child is symbiotic with the mother. The child is one with the mother. And everything is mediated through the mother's view, including getting to know the world. The mother has a lack of empathy, and she cannot understand the child in the deepest sense of the word. And again, because the child understands himself and the world through the mother, a lack of empathy implies that the child cannot empathize with himself. He needs the mother's empathy to acquire empathy.
Thankfully, I learned different. I was very lucky that from a very young age, she made such little rapport with me that I was able to first easily see through the crap. And secondly, I just knew she was wrong. I always knew she was wrong.
And so on. And because he keeps failing,
I don't know what else to say. It was very obvious to me my whole life. So I didn't buy into it.
His self.
I got 140 something IQ now as an adult.
Subjective.
You can't fool me being a lower IQ to have me believe things when I'm a higher IQ. It doesn't work. I just see through it. So
the true self cannot be apprehended, cannot be comprehended. The mother, the narcissistic mother, fails to provide the child with the most basic tools of gauging internal state. In other words, she hampers, obstructs the development of an internal working model and a theory of mind. Children of narcissistic mothers know nothing about other people, and even less about the world. Solipsistic, exactly like the mother, they revolve around themselves, swirling into the black hole, self-consuming. Now, we mentioned grandiosity, which is a sense of self-importance. This kind of mother exaggerates achievements and talents, expects to be recognized as superior without commensurate achievements, and is manipulative. What the child learns is that a fake biography is much preferable to a real one. Pretension is preferable to being true. Lying is,
and you know what?
More convenient.
I just realized, in fact, as I'm thinking, my mom never allowed me to be me when I was a kid growing up. It was as if it was programmed into my subconscious, which is, this is harmful what you did actually. This is not correct or healthy parenting. In my young boy mind, the perfect ideal that my mother brainwashed me with is that if I'm a good child, that was me being just folding my hands together, being quiet, not saying anything, not expressing myself whatsoever. Non-expression is you being good. Being quiet is you being good. No, that's sick. That's psychotic.
Unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love, and she instrumentalizes the child. She tries to force the child to realize these dreams. She uses emotional blackmail. She says, I had such high expectations of you. The child becomes an extension of the mother, and by implication, one with the mother. The interactions between narcissistic mothers and their children, are histrionic interactions. The mother believes that she is special and unique. She can be understood by or associate with high special status people. Only very few can grasp who she is and what she has to offer. She often complains of being discriminated against, envied, pulled down, taken down by people who are much inferior to her.
Oh yeah, at work when she used to work at the Woodhull Hospital, every day she would come home. It's all she would talk about all day for years. I remember just all these people I work with, they're basically below me, and all these types, and you know they discriminate against me, even though I speak more languages than they do, so I'm better than them, so I should be higher. This is all I heard. That's sick, weird talk. I mean, it was normal at the time. I didn't know any better as a kid, but as an adult, when I think back upon that, I'm like, yeah, that's not normal. If your brain goes there to feel that way and speak that way, that's the root. That's the psycho weird shit. We see it.
The child learns that the world is a dangerous place when you engage in excellence and when you're a giant, and that this is a price to be paid for accomplishing and attaining things. Ironically, this creates in the child a perverse incentive. The child says, well, if I truly accomplish things, people will try to take me down. They will try to destroy me. They will hate me. They will envy me. But if I just pretend to accomplish things, maybe I'll get by. Maybe no one will really envy me, because I'll be playing the game of faking it without making it. And so the mother creates a pseudo-human, an imitation, a parody of a man or a woman or a human being, a caricature in effect. And this caricature of a child, later adult, requires excessive admiration, has a sense of entitlement, and so on. And the mother also feels entitled. She feels entitled to her child's unbridled admiration, to her child's time and physical presence. She demands favorable treatment, automatic compliance, and so on and so forth. The narcissistic mother, would not hesitate to neglect the child to the point of death.
Fletcher was disabled, and her parents, according to police, just left her there for years.
A child who does not fulfill her needs, who does not cater to her psychological demands, a child who does not serve her, is a dead child anyhow. She doesn't have the necessary resources, emotional or other, to invest in anyone who is not a perfect, ideal source of narcissistic supply.
Neglecting someone to the point of death. Do you know how many times as a kid when I was growing up, I heard endless stories of my mom coming back home from the hospital that she used to work
Remember
at.
what that idiot said?
I saw more angels today. I saw more demons. I saw more dead people in the elevator with me when we were going up. The people who died, they came with the elevator. I see angels and spirits all the time. I see flashing lights. You know, I see them standing here. I see them standing there.
Is that disgusting and transgressive against our own dignity, or what?
Exactly. It's not an accident. All aspects of cluster B personality disorders correlate with each other. That's the point. Do you understand this? It's not you're accidentally blind, but you're... No, it's all turned, all the cogs co-turn together.
Imagine the effect this has on the child. There is a mind meld between the narcissistic mother's mind and the child's mind. Anyhow, there's symbiosis until age 24 to 36 months. Anyhow, they share a single mind until then. Almost. Not fully, of course, but almost. But in the case of the offspring of a narcissistic mother, this mind meld continues indefinitely. There's no separation, no individuation. The child remains a figment in the mother's mind. Narcissists, exactly like borderlines, exist only through other people's minds. They are parasites. They exist only through other people's gaze. This is a lesson emanating from the narcissistic mother. You, as far as I'm concerned, she says,
on the rails.
You exist
exactly what my uncle said.
only if you service my mind. Only if you are a part of my mind.
Yeah, that describes her exactly. She barely participated directly interacting with me in that
This kind of
playful
mother is
sense.
Interpersonally
Hardly at all, my whole
exploitative,
life.
Of course. She takes
No
advantage
interest.
of the child
It's not
to
good,
achieve her
not
own
normal.
ends. She is unwilling, unable to recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of the child. So the child learns to not have feelings and to not have needs, to self-deny.
The dignity of the child? No. The parent in this position, her own self, she knows only her own dignity. The child gets his things taken away from him, the toys taken away from him, without him being asked about whether he wants that to happen, or even without him even being notified of the fact that it even ever happened. It just happened behind his back and no one will even tell him. Let him figure it out. Just gone. We already did the decision making and the thinking for him. See? You're gonna respect his input. That's the sickness of cluster B and narcissism. That's psychopathy. That's narcissism. That's borderline. That's all the related intercluster B personality disorder clusters. That's it right there. Not regarding the rights of other people.
Don't be impressed by the narcissist's coercive techniques of gratifying himself. He's not gratifying himself. He's gratifying a harsh master, his false self, which is often coupled with a harsh inner critic. So the child of a narcissistic mother learns to deny his needs, to eliminate his wishes, to suppress any demands he may have. He creates the false self to resemble his mother. The false self is godlike, omnipotent, omniscient, exactly like mother, infallible, never makes mistakes, harsh, demanding, disempathic. It's mother. False self is mother. She would use the child to aggrandize herself at his school or university. She's arrogant and haughty in behavior and in attitude. But many mothers, narcissistic mothers, gradually migrate and become covert, inverted narcissists. So they bask in the glory of the child. They instrumentalize the child to obtain supply, and then they abscond with this supply. They hijack the supply, so to speak. So if the child is famous, the mother is famous for being the famous child's mother. She's famous by proxy, vicariously, through the child. The child becomes a mere channel to the outer world, a suction cup, sucking narcissistic supply from the environment. Even more virulently, and it's not a topic for today's video, the symbiotic connection between the mother's mind and the child's mind, and later the child turned adult's mind, is never severed, never goes away. This is a topic for another video. The narcissistic mother inhabits, colonizes her child's mind forever via processes such as entraining and others. This is a unique phenomenon. It's a hive mind and requires its own treatment. Suffice it to say that the child watches the world, observes the world through his mother's eyes. It's eerie. It's reminiscent of Hitchcock's Psycho, the 1960 movie. She never goes away. She's there. Tentacles all over, octopus-like. And it's a lesion that keeps dictating the narcissist's life. But it has also amazing cognitive artifacts and emotional consequences. The narcissist's inability to access positive emotions is an outcome of this colonizing process. But again, it's not the topic for today's video. Let's talk about the psychotic mother. Now, psychosis is a general term. It's actually a family of disorders known as psychotic disorders. These are abnormalities involving delusions, hallucinations, and what we call negative symptoms. This kind of mother creates an alternative universe, an alternative world, very similar to a cult, where it's the mother and the child against a world that is almost always hostile. And sometimes it's the mother and the child and God against such a world. It's always a coalition involving the child in the majority of cases, and sometimes God himself. And so this coalition is a coalition of the willing fighting the axis of evil. And it involves beliefs that dictate behaviors. Hallucinations are perception-like experiences that occur without an external stimulus. When the child is very young, a mother who has hallucinations will try to convince the child that these are not hallucinations, that she has special powers somehow to see things and hear things that other people don't. And so it's a form of self-aggrandizement, but founded on real experience. Hallucination is perceived by the psychotic as real. It's actually a projection of internal objects onto the world. It's hyper-reflexivity. The child, especially a very young child, convinces himself or herself that mother is right and that mother is superior. She sees and hears things that are real, but only she can see and hear. So this duality of a superior being who is privy to information that is privileged persists with the child throughout life. And the child could become, for example, a rabid religious person. She switches from one topic to another. This is known as derailment or loose associations. She answers questions which are only obliquely related or completely unrelated questions that were never asked. And this is known as tangentiality. She also goes on tangents. Gradually, the child will learn, wrongly, that the only sense prevailing is inside himself. Only his inside makes sense. Only his internal world is organized and communicative and not chaotic. The world out there is the opposite. So the child learns to become self-reliant, self-containing, solipsistic, because the child believes that the world is crazy, chaotic nonsense, cannot be made sense of. There's no meaning out there. And everything comes from the inside. Child sinks deeper and deeper into himself. Like the mother shuts herself. It's not catatonia, which requires immobility, physical immobility. It's emotional catatonia, if you wish. The mother stops to become, stops being. She does not interact with the child emotionally or expresses emotions or affects in any way, shape, or form, and she lacks will. There's nothing motivating her from the inside. She becomes expressionless. She avoids eye contact. The intonation of her speech, her prosody, is very monotonous. Movements of hand, head, and face that normally give an emotional emphasis to speech disappear. Body language is muted. Avolition is a decrease in motivated, self-initiated, purposeful activities. The mother begins to resemble a robot, and a very basic robot with very basic programming, primitive programming. She sits for long periods of time. She shows little interest in participating in social activities. There's also alogia, anhedonia, asociality. Alogia is, or alogia, is diminished speech output. Anhedonia is decreased ability to experience pleasure. And asociality is apparent, is a lack of interest in social interactions. The mother withdraws. She isolates herself. She observes all this. Is exposed to all this. Mother is vanishing bit by bit. It's the most terrifying thing imaginable, because mother is disappearing incrementally, gradually, part by part, and it's inexorable. There's nothing the child can do about this. Imagine the sense of helplessness and hopelessness and the ensuing anxiety and depression. Okay, these are the types of dead mothers and their effects on their children. As I said, the complex of the dead mother was first described by Andre Green in 1980. He suggested that we come to know about the dead mother complex through something called transference depression. Transference depression in therapy is a repetition of an infantile depression. So you see that it is an infant who is depressed. And this, says Andre Green, proves that there has been a dead mother in the background of such patient. And the essential characteristic of this depression is that it occurs in the presence of an object that itself is absorbed in mourning. So this depression is reflective or reflexive, secondary. The child regards his mother, the dead mother, as a mother in mourning, as a grieving mother, as a mother that is self-absorbed because she's sad. Child has very primitive ways of interpreting the world. He doesn't have a lot of repertory or experience. He's binary, I feel good, I feel bad. Mommy is feeling bad. Mommy is sad. Mommy is mourning. The child, through mirror empathy, the child reflects her, becomes her. The symbiosis at that stage, remember, child is one with the mother. She is sad, he is sad. She is depressed, he is depressed. And this is transference depression. And the causes of these mournings can be many. But the mother does not admit them. does not verbalize them, does not communicate them. It's ambient. It's in the atmosphere. The maternal object is very, very threatening because something is happening there. Mother is sinking and disappearing and avoiding and hurtful, and yet the child can't make sense of it because mother is not telling him anything. This is a non-communicative mother, a cold mother, a hard mother. And this is the mother the child introjects. That's the mother the child identifies with and internalizes. She's hard, he becomes hard. She is unfeeling, he becomes unfeeling. She is cold, he becomes, yes, you guessed it, cold. Child loves mother. He tries to imbue mother with his newfound, budding emotions, but mother is rejecting, frustrating. I refer you to work by Winnicott and Gundry and others in the British School of Object Relations in the 1960s. Mother creates a schizoid core because she's rejecting and frustrating. The child learns to withdraw from her. And the decathexis is a horrendous, brutal process. The child loves mother more than anything in the world. You know what? Mother is the world. The decathexis, the withdrawal, the avoidance of mother is the decathexis and withdrawal and avoidance from the world. The child it's suicide, isn't it? When you withdraw from the world totally, because the world is frustrating and rejecting and cold and unfeeling and hard, what are you doing? You are killing yourself, and not softly. The child tries, approaches the mother. This is called reparation. It's very common in the rapprochement phase. The child approaches the mother, reparation, but keeps being rebuffed one way or another. The mother is self-absorbed, she's narcissistic. The mother is volatile and labile, she's a borderline. The mother is no longer with us. She's floating somewhere in the upper stratosphere, she's psychotic. Whatever the reason may be, the child keeps being rejected, frustrated, abandoned, neglected. The reparation keeps failing, and the child develops a profound sense of helplessness, impotence, and threat. And they become dominant. At some point, they become dominant. How can you survive like this? You can't. You need to defend against this. Because if this is your state of mind, you'd rather not have a mind. So this creates complex defenses. And these defenses associate a mirror representation of the disinvestment in the mother with an unconscious identification with the dead mother. So, on the one hand, the child withdraws from the mother, disinvests in her, decathects, takes back his emotions, doesn't attempt anymore to bond with her, to attach to her, doesn't regard her as a secure base, on the one hand. On the other hand, he still needs her, he still loves her, he still depends on her, so he internalizes her. It's a compromise. I will not attempt to connect with my mother in reality because that's painful, that's hurtful, that's frustrating. Instead, I will attempt to connect with my mother internally, because I control the internal space. I will not be hurt, or at least I can minimize the pain. This is, of course, the narcissistic solution, isn't it? Snapshotting, introjection. And the result of this process is the psychic murder of the mother. There's no hatred involved, it's just necessity. The child needs to kill the mother. Because if you reject mother, if you tell mother, I'm going to kill you, if you aggress against mother, she's going to withdraw further. This would guarantee maternal detachment. Killing the mother inside the mind, all this is done secretly. The child learns to keep secrets from mother. So the child becomes solipsistic. You're beginning to see the rudiments of pathological narcissism. That's why I consider the dead mother complex is super critical in narcissism, way more than many of the suggestions of Freud. That's why I keep mentioning the dead mother in many of my videos. Getting attached to people who are not threatening, who are not significant, who are not meaningful. Sources of narcissistic supply. There's a hole in the middle. It's a black, all-consuming, sucking hole, and you surround its periphery with people who cannot hurt you because they are not meaningful. They can't do anything to you. They don't have the power. You don't give them the power. You don't experience emotions or empathy. You objectify them the same way you have been objectified by your mother. This silent destructiveness doesn't allow the child to re-establish object relations with people. He cannot overcome the conflict. He cannot, the internal conflict with his mother. He cannot open the way to connections that would strengthen his ability to overcome the conflict. He creates a shield that prevents access to the conflict. So the child breaks in two. In one part of the child, there is an unresolved conflict with mother. And in the other part of the child, there's a fake, false version which interacts with people who would never be mother, would never be given the powers that mother had. The child is trying to heal the first part, the part involving the conflict, by teaming up with maternal substitutes, with stand-in mothers. So the only thing that endures in the adult narcissist's life is a dull psychic pain, some feeling of hollowness and emptiness, an incapacity to bond or attach or love any object, no affects. I can't begin to tell you how it feels. It feels like you have to hold yourself together all the time, actively, or you will disintegrate into molecules and be spread over the floor and never put yourself back together. It's a constant Humpty Dumpty situation. Hatred. Hatred is as impossible as love, by the way. Instead of hatred, there's devaluation. The narcissist, the child who grows up to become a narcissist under the dead mother, this child doesn't deal with love or hate. He deals with functions. He deals with, she can serve me, she can't serve me. And if she can't serve me, she's persecutory, she's frustrating me on purpose, she's the enemy. But there's no hatred involved. It's just, okay, you know, she's useless, let's discard her. And this is what many victims can't wrap their minds around. They are not sufficiently important to be hated, as they are not sufficiently significant to be loved. They are nothing. They are buttons, they're instruments, they're tools, they're functions, they're abstractions, they're narratives. And victims don't understand. They've never been three-dimensional to the narcissist. The narcissist is incapable of deep emotions, hatred included. He's capable of envy and anger. But hatred is the opposite of love, the principle of ambivalence. Narcissist is incapable of the former as he is incapable of the latter. He discards you coldly and calculatingly. You're a piece of trash at the end of the process. Who hates trash? Why is the other party angry? Because narcissists are incapable of introducing into the calculus of interpersonal relationships emotions, for example. The dead mother is omnipresent, but she kind of seized the child. She seizes the child. She makes the child a captive of his mourning for her. The absent mother, the dead mother, believes that if she makes the child if she forces the child or coerces the child to grieve for her, to miss her, that's the surest way of keeping him around. It's a form of emotional blackmail. So she fosters in the child prolonged grief by withdrawing, by avoiding, by neglecting, by ignoring, by chastising and castigating and criticizing and humiliating, shaming, blackmailing, you owe me, if you don't do this, I will die. All these techniques are intended to produce in the child a sense that mother is tantalizingly close but unattainable, and the resulting grief. Grief is as strong as love and as strong as hate in binding people together, and the only mechanism of attachment the dead mother trusts. She's been grieving all her life, and she is attached to herself. She's narcissistic, remember? And it's clear.
And to add the noteworthy point, a relevant point regarding this grieving sort of paradigm that keeps being prolongedly lived endlessly by this narcissistic mother, like a grieving or a faux grieving or a, I don't know what it is exactly, but it's, this guy's very smart actually. Part of her grieving process when I was growing up as a kid was kind of shitting on my father, who was divorced from her by that point in my life, where I was, beyond toddler years, where there were already two separate split parents. But she would always talk bad about him. Oh, he does this, he does that, he drinks, he's bad. Talking bad about him a lot, all the time. So, really, was she grieving the fact that, she never got anything better? Regardless, morality says you can't shit on a young boy's father in front of him. It's immoral to do that. So only a psychologically sick person will do that.
And this clinical picture develops against the background of the child's inability to grasp the reasons for it. So the whole world looks totally crazy, senseless, arbitrary, and consequently menacious. I mentioned at the beginning that there's depression, infantile depression. There's a loss of meaning, the feeling of inability to repair the mourned object, to awaken the lost desire and passion to connect with this object. The mourning is not only for the mother, the mourning is for the lost potential to have bonded with mother, and the lost potential to have become who you could have become. It's multiple layers of mourning, which are replicated to the letter in relationships with narcissists. He says, okay, maybe I failed with mother, but I'm a genius. So narcissism is compensatory also in this sense. Repression erases the memory traces of the mother's touch, her smell, how good she feels, any contact with her. No trace is left of it. The identification then is not with the mother, because the mother is gone in every possible way. She's been killed and buried, and her tomb was desecrated, and everything was burned to the ground. Scorched earth policy. It's the only way the child could cope with his pain and hurt and impotence.
A scorched earth policy, however, is still the best policy. It's still the policy I adopt now through a particular paradigm, that is the rebuke paradigm, and by finding that the person across from me remains unrepentant. That's the way in which you rightly protect yourself in this life, by properly ostracizing those people.
So what's left? A whole vacuum. Modification of the maternal attitudes is inexplicable. The child can't explain to himself, why am I being rejected suddenly, ignored? The child can't wrap his mind around this. I mean, the child is flailing about, trying desperately to solve this conundrum, which is unsolvable, of course, because it's not the child's fault. It's a frenetic, unquenchable search for maternal love substitutes, for example, pleasures, attempts to find meaning in displacements, in other things. There's there's a kind of crazy race to reanimate the dead mother, to give her back the taste for life, to undo her mourning and grieving, to say, Mommy, don't grieve, don't mourn, I'm here. Am I not a reason to be happy and to feel pleasure? To breathe into her by any means possible, artificial if necessary, the joy of living. And then to compete with the object of mourning in a kind of precocious triangulation. Ignore the reason you're mourning, look at me, says the child. The dead mother complex is a powerful and intense element, and it affects all the systems of the psyche, because the child feels that he has to retaliate against the maternal object, and the child undulates, oscillates. There's impotent rage in such a child. There's paralysis. He's helpless against the violence inside him, against his own aggression. There's an intensified feeling of emptiness. The most deleterious effects on everything that makes a human human. It is a dead mother that creates dead children who become dead inside adults. Death is intergenerational, transmitted intergenerationally. Not so life. Life requires effort. Life is a project. Death is a default. Today we're going to discuss a test, a simple test to tell you whether someone is a full-fledged narcissist, can be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, or whether he is merely narcissistic. Now, Len Sperry made the distinction between narcissistic style and narcissistic disorder. Theodore Millon adopted this distinction. And generally speaking, narcissism, pathological narcissism, is of course a spectrum. Not every a-hole and jerk and ex-husband is a narcissist, or ex-wife for that matter. So how can we tell if someone is here to stay as a narcissist, or if it's just a phase, or something bad? I call it the 3 R's test. R, like the letter R. The 3 R's test: remorse, remediation, and restoration. Now, to qualify, remorse has to be expressed repeatedly. It must be genuine and heartfelt. It should entail a modicum of sacrifice, embarrassment, inconvenience, and public disclosure and exposure. Regretting one's misdeeds in public is much more convincing than sending a private text or whispering "sorry" anonymously. So remorse has to be ostentatious. This is the first test. A full-fledged narcissist would render his or her feigned remorse private and fleeting. And if you challenge that remorse or that expression of remorse, the narcissist will become aggressive. Someone who is not a full-fledged narcissist, albeit may have narcissistic traits, but cannot be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and definitely healthy people, normal people, their remorse is long-lasting, and they are not ashamed to express it in front of others. This is test number 1, R number 1. R2, remediation. Remediation requires making amends, offering reparations. Reparations which are commensurate with the offending acts. Reparations that bear some symbolic relation to them and are proportional. And so financial abuse, for example, can be absolved only with the aid of monetary compensation that corresponds to the damage done and suffered. Remediation. And a typical narcissist would minimize his wrongdoing and therefore offer the kind of remediation which is ineffective, even I would say insulting. If at all, many narcissists would deny any wrongdoing and would just not offer remediation. On the very contrary, they would pose as victims. If you want to tell the difference between someone who is a full-fledged narcissist and someone who is not, remediation and remorse are key issues. Long-lasting, publicly expressed remorse coupled with an offer of compensation, reparation, what the Germans call Wiedergutmachung, making it good again. And finally, restoration, the third R. Restoration involves affording one's victims the opportunity for closure, if not forgiveness, so that they can move on with their lives. Now, in many court processes and judicial processes, there's something called victim statement or victim impact statement. The aim is to provide closure. The victim, if alive, can make the statement, or members of the family of the victim. And so restoration, giving the victim the opportunity to go through the abuse, understand it more deeply, and if possible forgive and move on. Most narcissists, if not all narcissists, people who are full-fledged narcissists, would never give you closure, would never allow you to process the abuse, would never collaborate with you, in providing restoration. They would deny the abuse or cast themselves as victims. All other people usually would listen to you empathically and try to put themselves in your shoes and offer you a modicum of solace and succor and help and so on and so forth, even if you accuse them of doing something. So these are the three R's. True narcissists and true psychopaths, they fail the 3 R's test at every turn. Their remorse is feigned. They provide little or no recompense, and they never put themselves at the victim's disposal and in her shoes in order to allow her to achieve what she needs most: closure, a restored sense of justice, and the ability to trust again.
Does my mom show an appearance to our perceptive eyes that is more consistent with the former description that this professor has provided to us? That of the genuinely repentant person? Or does my mom show an appearance that is of a type more consistent with the latter description that this professor gave, which is that of the non-repentant person?
We are going to discuss, normally, stupidity. Why? Oh, why is the narcissist so bloody stupid? Is he for real? Now, when I say he, it of course pertains to she as well. Gender pronouns are interchangeable. There's an equal number of women and men diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder nowadays, as opposed to the 70s and 80s, when the vast majority of NPD sufferers were men. Today, that's not the situation. Women have taken over. Women have become more narcissistic than men in many ways, regrettably. So, I'm going to use he for literary convenience sake, but of course it applies to women as well. We're going to discuss a very strange phenomenon. The fact that even highly gifted, highly endowed, highly intelligent, extremely high IQ narcissists are total retards when it comes to life itself. And apropos this, my name is Sam Vaknin. I'm the author of Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited. I'm a former visiting professor of psychology in Southern Federal University in Rostov-on-Don in Russia, and I'm entering my 11th year on the faculty of CIAPS, the Commonwealth for International Advanced Professional Studies, in Cambridge, the United Kingdom, Canada, and with a campus in Lagos, Nigeria. Now that you have my academic resume, let us proceed to what interests you most. And what interests you most is Sam Vaknin's hair. No, I'm kidding. What interests you most is, of course, narcissistic abuse and its multifarious manifestations. Let's start with facts, as we usually do. There is a disagreement as to whether people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder have an IQ which is higher than the average or lower than the average. Carver in 1977 came up with a former answer. BPDs, borderlines, are more intelligent than the average population. Actually, he found that the IQ of people diagnosed with borderline personality disorder is around 135. Swirsky-Sacchetti or something in 1993 found the exact opposite. It was a study published by the National Institutes of Health in the United States, which is the authority on mental health, among other things. And the study found conclusively that people with borderline personality disorder actually have a much lower IQ than average, and that includes their verbal skills. And the same debate has been raging for decades over narcissistic personality disorder, psychopathy, and so on and so forth. But this, what is the level of IQ they have and how much IQ they have, this may be the wrong question, because IQ tests measure types of intelligence that have little to do with life skills, and perspicacity. Look it up. In short, some people are intelligent, clever, smart, sharp, cunning, but also unwise. Wisdom is not connected to IQ. Wisdom is not a derivative or an inevitable outcome of a high IQ, a high intelligence quotient. Perspicacity, the ability to kind of predict the future and adapt yourself positively to it, also has nothing to do with IQ. So the question is wrong. The question we should be asking is, are narcissists and borderlines and psychopaths and so on, cluster B personalities, dark personalities, are they wise? Are they positively adapted to life itself and its challenges, its exigencies, the vicissitudes and ups and downs and cycles of life? Are these people built to live and to survive and to thrive? Or does the disorder preclude all these points? Pseudo-stupidity is not the same as stupidity. Pseudo-stupidity is pretending to be stupid, acting as if naive, but actually behind the scenes being very, very sharp and cunning and manipulative and so on. This is pseudo-stupidity. Stupidity is actually being stupid, being inane and effete, and not very adept at coping with life and designing survival strategies and coping techniques. So we should distinguish pseudo-stupidity from stupidity, as we will be doing shortly. Second thing, when I say dark personalities, these are not people diagnosed with narcissism, these are not people diagnosed with psychopathy, and so on and so forth. In the dark triad contains three elements: subclinical psychopathy, psychopathy that cannot be diagnosed; subclinical narcissism that cannot be diagnosed, and Machiavellianism, the ability to manipulate your human environment in order to secure favorable outcomes. A form of self-efficacy that comes at the expense of other people by exploiting them or coercing them or gaslighting them or brainwashing them or entraining them. So these are terminological issues. Remember and replay if you have to. Okay, so let's proceed. Why do we find some narcissists, some borderlines, and some psychopaths, actually the majority of them, why do we find them a bit stupid? Why do they commit so many mistakes? Why are they error prone? Why do they rarely get anything right? Anything from relationships to the workplace? Why do they misread other people so egregiously? Almost to the level of autism spectrum disorder. What's wrong with these people? What's wrong with cluster B people?
Now, I've said many times openly, possibly to Anthony, I've implied it or said it outright, but actually definitely directly to my mom. Multiple times I've said it very clearly. I've said it's almost like it's an autism spectrum disorder. It isn't really actually necessarily that, but it kind of cross-manifests as that because it has the same manifestation. And on at least one occasion in particular, she admitted, Barbara admitted, as if to confess or acknowledge outright that issue, that, quote, maybe I do have some autism spectrum or something like this, I don't know. She admitted this once. After many times me saying this, it occurred to her that it's plausible. And that is enough of a hint that we understand that is right. We're all in agreement. It is plausible. We're seeing it. We're seeing the evidence.
The cluster B personality disorders are either pseudo-stupid or stupid. For example, covert narcissists are pseudo-stupid. They pretend to be stupid because they know that by acting stupid, people around them will put their guard down, and it gives them an opportunity to penetrate the defenses of other people and manipulate them and obtain the desirable results. So this is pseudo-stupidity. People who are covert narcissists, they are also pseudo-humble. They display pseudo-humility. They pretend to be modest. They describe themselves as hapless victims. They're never to blame for anything. They're never guilty of anything. They've never done anything wrong. They are just continuously being victimized and preyed upon. And they are codependent, actually. And so on. So this is a form of pseudo-stupidity. It's to put yourself down, to underestimate your capacity to read other people, to manipulate other people, to interact with other people, to claim that somehow you're disabled, and that's why you keep falling prey to predators. It's a form of pseudo-stupidity. It's typical of covert narcissists. The overt narcissists, the grandiose narcissists, and the borderline, and the psychopath, they're simply stupid. They're not pseudo-stupid. They're really, actually stupid. And in this video today, I will explain to you why. I'll give you the reasons. And there are so many of them, so many reasons, so many causes, so many etiologies, or what we call etiopathology. There's such a background of dynamics which are not helpful, not conducive to wisdom, that it is, what is shocking is that these people survive at all. I mean, they are so profoundly moronic because they can't help it. That's the way they're built. Start with grandiosity. Grandiosity is a severe cognitive distortion. It impairs the reality testing of those affected. It also undermines and sabotages self-efficacy. Now, those are very many big words, $10 words, my favorites. Let me try to break them down for you. Grandiosity is the belief that your inflated self-image is actually real. It's not fake. Your false self is not false. Other people may be getting it wrong, but you know for sure that you are unique, unprecedented, amazing, perfect, brilliant, and so on and so forth. It would take other people time to discover all these things. That's because they're more stupid than you. You are superior in every conceivable way, intellectually, bodily, whatever. So, grandiosity is a filter that distorts information from reality, incoming information, feedback, input. They're all distorted. They're all reframed. Grandiosity falsifies reality. And so in the absence of a firm grasp on reality, of course you can't act wisely. The second thing is grandiosity hampers, obstructs self-efficacy. In order to operate efficaciously, efficiently in the environment with other people, you need to be able to read people appropriately. You need to be able to resonate with people. In short, you need to have empathy. The lack of empathy, common to all cluster B personality disorders, and in the case of borderlines, it's not a lack, but it's substantial reduction in empathy. That's the most recent research, most recent studies we have. It even made it into the DSM-5. So the deficiencies in empathy, which in the case of the psychopath lead to absolute absence of any kind of empathy except cold empathy. Cold empathy is cognitive empathy and reflexive empathy. So the absence of emotional empathy, warm empathy, the ability to resonate emotionally with another person. When this is missing, you can't decipher other people properly. You can't understand other people. And obviously you can't manage yourself properly and efficiently with other people.
A lack of empathy means and is associated with an inability to interpret correctly not only facts and reality around you, but see, there's both IQ and EQ, where IQ, intelligence, is perceiving facts correctly and logic. EQ is perceiving the emotional reality of people and relationships around you. But GABA B really underlies both, and intelligence across the spectrum underlines both. So imagine this: if you have a lack of a color vision, if you're colorblind and you don't have color sight, when you look at the crosswalk, a light, you see red light, yellow light, green light. Well, to a colorblind person, the red and the green look the same color, and the yellow looks almost the same also. It's very confusing for them. But neurally, psycho-emotionally, that's what happens. Everyone's crazy. You look at something and it looks, oh, that's bad. No, actually it was good, but your faulty wires told you it's bad because it's reading faulty. You get it?
Miscomprehension of life, and so the world. This undermines your capacity to obtain goals. These people, narcissists, to realize your potential, to actualize your potential, to they're extremely disabled people. To collaborate with other people to their disability big goals, bigger goals. Were it far to work in a team, to survive in a workplace, they may have. To have an ongoing relationship to solve mathematical equations, savory, but how often do you need it? In a happy one. The capacity to
a savory and happy relationship with my mother is exactly what I've been missing for my entire life.
And how do you cope with your wife? In short, it limits you. Lovers, children, grandiosity and a lack of empathy limit you to the point, the authorities, that you are stupid. How do you survive? They alienate people. And they narrow your opportunities and subject you to recurrent diversity. Repetition compulsion is the direct outcome of this. Narcissists and psychopaths and borderline keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. No matter how often they get penalized, no matter how high the cost, they keep repeating it. And they keep repeating these mistakes because they keep disastrously misreading their environment and other people.
I told her repeatedly, in front of Anthony even, when we were sitting down at that one meeting we had, I advised repeatedly, I said, stop believing yourself. When your mind, your tricky, defective mind, comes up with crazy ideas, stop the crazy idea from reaching the part of your core mind that has you believe those ideas. Don't self-connect. Break it apart actually and go, oh, I'm starting, the retarded part of my mind thinks that he did something wrong, but obviously if he's saying he's not, he's closer to God than I am, and he's much more intelligent. Therefore, if he thinks differently than me, he's automatically higher. Therefore, I know I'm wrong just because he's saying something different from me. There you go. That's the easiest answer you could ever make for yourself. Now you've figured it out.
It is a great definition of stupidity. Now, these people, cluster B personalities, they lack impulse control. They're defiant, they're contumacious, they reject authority, and they decompensate under stress.
Rejecting authority and decompensating under stress. Wow, yes. They make the one who they wrong. Here's the thing I want to really stress. Here's what happens. When you do wrong to somebody else in this life, you offend them, you give them the jurisdiction to be your teacher now, as they wag their shameful finger at you. You understand that? So when you cross against someone wrongly, such that you raise their ire, their anger, and they now naturally rebuke you, who made them your authority? You did. And did you make them an authority of sorts? Yes. Why? Because you gave them natural jurisdiction for them to teach you a lesson. What's it called? It's called teach you a lesson, there's not another word used. Why is it called teach? Because they're authority now. You understand? So don't wrong people in life. Why? Because when you wrong them, you make them your master. Now do you get it? And regarding decompensation, haven't we seen her doing irrational and harmful things that just continue to damage the relationship over and over and compound the damage instead of doing the opposite, which is to heal it?
Their defenses crumble and they act inanely, crazy making. They do insane things. And these drawbacks guarantee frustration or worse. Again, acting in a self-defeating, self-handicapping, self-destructive manner is a form of extreme, ingrained, profound stupidity.
Yeah, seriously. It's like they don't even realize that the stupid thing that they do is harmful to their own selves as they're doing it.
Next mechanism. In most of these disorders, there's extreme dissociation, especially in borderline personality disorder, but also in narcissism. There is dissociation. And because these people are dissociative, they're very bad at learning from past experiences. They never learn the lesson.
Yeah, they never learn the lesson. This is, I think, the most profound statement of this entire program. I don't understand. They don't get it. There it is. That's the defect. Look, you touch a hot stove, you get burned once, you would think the receptors in your brain immediately reorganize to save you from feeling the pain of the same mistake again, such that the next time you're even close to a stove, your own brain will preemptively, like, psychologically hurt you. Preemptively to hurt you, to keep you away from the bigger hurt even more again. That's the thing. You see? That is what saves relationships in life. When you make a mistake against another person, and then You have remorse naturally because you're not a psychopath or cluster B personality type of any of the other varieties of that. When you have remorse and you repent, your own brain auto-swerves away from repeating the mistake. But when you're sick, you just keep hammering the same spot stupidly even though it keeps hurting you.
Not because they are unable to derive a lesson, but because they keep forgetting the facts and the details. Or they keep rewriting history to conform to their grandiose, fantastic, inflated self-image.
How many times has she wrote to me or to Anthony trying to shape me as a flat-out liar, saying that history was somehow completely different, somehow, I don't know how the hell, completely different than what I said it was. This, when her own eyes and neural wiring are the ones that are fundamentally defective.
And so there's no learning. These people never learn. And again, it leads to repetition compulsion. Covering the same ground, the same swampish, quicksand ground. Their previous actions adumbrate their next actions. Their obstinacy, what appears to be obstinacy, is actually panic. These people are in panic because they know that they don't know. They have no database of life experience that they can draw on safely. They are not sure of their own experiences. They are not sure whether their memories are true or some kind of fictional concoction. It's a nightmarish existence. They go through life second-guessing themselves, confabulating in order to bridge memory gaps. It's terrifying. It's like having a very, very short-term memory without any long-term memory. A goldfish memory, a Korsakoff syndrome memory. It's pretty frightening. But it also leads to what strikes observers as extreme stupidity. I mean, for Christ's sake, you've done the same thing a few years ago. Why did you do it again? Why do you keep repeating your mistakes and your misbehavior and your misdeeds and your misconduct? And why do you keep finding yourself in the throes of conundrums and scandals and mess and worse, threats? And why do you keep driving yourself into situations which represent risk and danger and adversity, doing precisely, replicating actions that you've done before? It's a form of stupidity. These people are also entitled. They think they're entitled to special treatment without any commensurate accomplishments. And they're manic, like in bipolar, they're manic, so they never plan thoroughly. They're sloppy. They execute with no attention to detail. So everything goes awry, everything goes wrong, everything looks shoddy and con-artistic in a way. And so they appear to be incapable of the perfection that they attribute to themselves, or even much less. They appear to be a kind of poor imitation of the real thing. And this strikes people as truly stupid, because with a minimal investment of resources, they could have accomplished so much more. They could have done, they could have achieved, they could have granted themselves the access that they so seek.
But they can't see. They're colorblind. When you stand there rebuking them, giving them the hint that they're the ones who really objectively just committed the wrong of this situation, that is the wrong here in God's eyes, and at the same time you hint strongly that it's so simple. An honest repentance and a considerable atonement gets the problem solved. easily. They just can't get it. They swear by their hallucinations and that and by their delusions that they're right. They're imprisoned in the false, nonsensical world of illusion.
To higher paying jobs, to better looking people, to more accomplished professionals, to institutions and so on. They deny themselves all these opportunities by refusing to invest, to commit. This is not laziness. It transcends laziness. It's some kind of resignation. It's like saying, well, if the world doesn't realize how deserving I am, how entitled I am, even without any effort on my part, then something's wrong with the world. I'm not gonna justify the world's ignorance and nescience and stupidity. How come they don't realize that I'm the world's leading genius, or the most drop-dead gorgeous woman, or the most amazing scholar? Or how come they don't realize this? They should have. And I should have to put no effort into communicating this to them, or justifying it, or underlying it, or founding it, or anything. I don't need to work hard. This is so self-evident that I'm superior and perfect and brilliant and godlike and amazing and omnipotent and omniscient. It should come as a self-evident truth, like in the Constitution of the United States, you know. This is, of course, extremely stupid. At the heart of all this is the fact that these people are immature. They are the mental equivalents of children. And this renders them naive and gullible. They're very open to manipulation, to extortion. They're prone to being victimized by con artists and swindlers because they trust themselves to never fall prey to a predator. It's part of their grandiosity. But there's another reason. Over the years, over the decades of their lives, these people have learned to leverage the appearance of infantile haplessness and helplessness. This infantile helplessness is a signal. What they're saying is, please don't hurt me, I'm just a baby. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. I'm a simpleton. Please don't hurt me. I'm naive and gullible. It is a kind of mimicry. I refer you to my video, the video that I've made about mimicry. Stupidity in this case is a kind of mimicry. They're pretending to be a lot less than they are, a lot less dangerous, a lot less evil, a lot less manipulative, a lot less Machiavellian, a lot less narcissistic, a lot less grandiose, a lot less worldly, and so on and so forth. They pretend to be terrified. They pretend to be hopeless. They pretend to be amiable. They pretend to be naive. And so they pretend all these things in order to fend off potential threats and predators. It's a Machiavellian tool, in effect. It's a manipulative strategy. Now, most of people with cluster B personality disorders, especially people with borderline personality disorder, suffer from an identity disturbance. Because they have memory gaps and severe dissociation, they are unable to form a stable core identity, and so they fluctuate between various identities on the fly, in response, in reaction to environmental pressures and stresses and stressors. So, because there's no core identity, there's identity disturbance, these people are unable to maintain continuity and coherence. They depend on other people for external regulation of a sense of self-worth, in the case of narcissism, or external regulation of emotions and moods in the case of borderline. And so, when you observe them from the outside, they appear to be fickle, unstable, stupidly disloyal to themselves, or even without selves. It's as if They are suggestible. The latest fad, the latest fashion, the latest statement, the latest question, turn them around 180 degrees. They don't have a stable center of gravity. They are catastrophically influenced by every bit of information from the environment and every push and pull of other people.
Yeah, this is an excellent point. What's very incredibly insulting to me and also very strange, otherwise not normal. She's insufficiently redirectable by me, the actual party harmed, who is also supposed to be someone who's close to her by relation. So she's indirectable by me. I can't come in there and say, Mom, you did this wrong, that's not good. And a normal person would say, huh? Oh, they look inside, reflect, change the circuitry, amend. There has to be plasticity. You upgrade, you do the new thing, you've learned, you've grown, good. No, she's like, oh no. You know what? Where does she take too much information from? The wrong sources. Her boyfriend. He could be up there at that place where they live, speaking about me, implying something, that something about me or the situation is wrong. It's unquestioned. She will just accept it. It doesn't go in one ear and out the other, as it does when I speak to her, goes in one ear and out the other. No, when he speaks, it's like, it becomes like that's a fact. Like that's the new, it's unquestioned, it becomes accepted. And that's the new basis that informs all the following decisions that they make about how to interact with me and with the whole situation, all right? By that, they attempt to justify sickening and worsening behavior. They create new facts, new slants, but with each other that's good, they believe it, and then they insulate against the outside world to change them and the narrative that they formed, the sick narrative. So by doing that, they remain unaccountable for as long as possible. He is not an idiot. You are lying about me, and other non-reality based imaginings. Non-accountable.
We call this suggestibility. It's very common in histrionic personality disorder. And this extreme dependency on external input makes them look really, really stupid. Additionally, these people have alloplastic defenses. They tend to blame other people, or the environment, or God, or the universe, or the world, or reality, what have you, or natural disasters, or whatever. They tend to blame the outside for their own misjudgments, miscalculations, defeats, and failures. And you know, when you do it all the time, it appears that you're covering up for something, covering up for your own inadequacy, worthlessness, inanity, lack of good judgment, and ultimately, stupidity. Generally, with alloplastic defenses comes a paralyzing external locus of control. It's as if people with cluster B personality disorders say, our fate is determined from the outside, there's nothing we can do about it. But this creates behaviors which are erroneously identified with stupidity. For example, indecisiveness, reticence, reluctance, avoidance, withdrawal.
Yep, she's chronically reluctant to properly repent and make up, and she instead withdraws, thereby, through that withdrawal, continuing the sin. Okay, and also compounding the magnitude of that sin by chronically adding to it, by basically adding insult to injury, which is first doing the problem and then withdrawing where you're supposed to be, instead coming closer and making apologies.
These are all behaviors of avoiding the world because the world is perceived essentially as hostile and malevolent and in control of their lives.
But the part they never figure out is, of course the world is hostile to you because they're responding to the first insult to them that originated with you. But your non-response to them is another further insult that compounds your own guilt, since ordinarily guilty people are repentant in life whenever they're not people who are dealing with pathological, psychological issues.
And this indecisiveness or avoidance, they appear to involve, you know, a lack of intelligence, simply a lack of intelligence. And people immediately spot them, immediately see through them, if they're willing. Because many people are not willing to see through these defenses and behaviors and so on. That's not the topic of today's video. But if you are willing, the narcissist, the psychopath, the borderline, on a first meeting, in the first 5 minutes, present you with a visit card. And on this visit card is a complete list of all their problems and all their dysfunctions. And so they're not very good at deceiving people or manipulating them, unless the victims want to be deceived, unless the victims derive some benefit from being manipulated. And this is why these personalities resort ultimately and pretty fast to entraining, brainwashing, and coercion. That's why they deteriorate into coercive acts, almost invariably. And finally, cluster B personalities are post-traumatic. They are compensatory. They're broken. They're false. At the core of each and every one of them, there's a bad object, a series of introjects, series of voices, which are harsh and critical and even sadistic. They have internal enemies. Many of their internal objects are persecutory. And so this constant battle zone, this constant civil war, leads them to abuse substances and develop addictions. All in all, these people are a sorry sight, and intelligent as they may be, they're absolute unmitigated idiots, inadequate